All right, thanks for joining us, everyone. Welcome to this month's Marquez community meeting. These are our communication channels for the time being. One thing that I do want to add to the open discussion today is the topic of what do we do if Twitter implodes, which seems very likely. Where do we go? But for the time,
I've seen. Sorry, yeah, we'll talk about it in the open discussion. Sorry about that.
let's do our intros. Minkyu, you're up.
Hey, hello, my name is Minkyu, and I'm a software engineer at Astronomer and part of the observability team, and I'm also a contributor of Marquez and Open Lineage. So good to be here and good to see you all.
Thank you. Prachi?
Hey, hi, my name is Prachi. I'm a part of observability team in Astronomer. I'm a new committer to Marquez project. Looking forward to making more of those.
Thank you. Michael Collado?
Hey, Mike Collado. I'm a staff software engineer at Astronomer and a committer to Marquez and to Open Lineage.
Thank you. Willie?
Yeah, so I'm Willie. I'm unofficially the project lead on Marquez, also the co-creator and a committer to Open Lineage. And I'm also at Astronomer working on observability.
Thank you. Julian?
Hello, I'm the project lead for the Open Lineage project.
Thank you. Peter?
Hi, I'm Peter. I'm a software engineer at Astronomer, and I'm a Marquez contributor.
Thank you. I'm Michael. I'm on the community team at Astronomer, and I coordinate these meetings. Willie, do you want to take it away?
Sure. Yeah, let's go to the next slide. Okay, so I think we wanted to release Marquez 028 this week, but I think we did hold off. One specific reason is that we wanted to get in the soft delete for namespaces. So what we see a lot is sometimes you want to seed Marquez and you see that metadata in a namespace, and deleting it was pretty difficult. You had to kind of delete either an individual data set or job. So now we have deletion at the namespace level, which is awesome. So I think it was worth holding off. We did merge that PR this morning. So that is now officially in. And I think we do have an official vote for 028 to be released. So maybe this week or definitely early next week, we'll have 028 out. There was also a few things around optimization of the current runs query. So the one thing that we do see, especially at Astronomer, is that there's a lot of runs, and that there's a runs table that has pretty much relationships with everything else, like data set versions and job versions. So that table in particular has a high cardinality, and we have optimized the query to improve just generally getting the current run for a job. And from Michael, you contributed new government stocks, which you'll go into in later slides. So that's part of the checklist we need for LFAI and data to get our silver badge and then eventually our gold badge, so we can officially graduate from the incubating state from LFAI and data. And there's just general bug fixes that will also be part of 028, which we don't have a list of, but if you go to our change log, there'll be a bunch listed in there.
All right. So I can give a brief update on our status with the LFAI and data program. So for those who might be watching this recording and unfamiliar with the LFAI, it's under the umbrella of the LF, the Linux Foundation, and projects are hosted and they need the approval not only of the TAC committee, but also the governing board. And hopefully we will be presenting to the TAC soon. More about that in just a second. First, here's an image that they have online of other projects that they host. As you can see, it's a number of prominent open source projects. Where we are today, incubation, we joined as an incubation project in December 2019, and we hope to be, as I said, presenting to the TAC soon to graduate. What is in between us and graduation? Well, at the moment, we're in a great position as far as organizations actively contributing to the project, as you can see here. Also, our substantial flow of commits is off the charts, as is our star count. We're also great with our collaborations, because Open Lineage is also an LFAI and data project. Where we need to advance is in the category of a significant contributing organization. We're making great progress on the core infrastructure initiative best practices badges, but we need to complete the silver and gold badges. And then once we do those things, we'll get on the agenda for a future TAC meeting, present a slide deck, and hopefully get the vote of the TAC to graduate.
And Michael, I don't want to speak too soon, but we might have another significant contributor that's part of the LFAI and Data Foundation. So more to come on that. I did reach out to them because I think there's some cross, what am I trying to say? There's mutual, it's benefit. I'm going to stop, but just know that I think we can fulfill that in the coming months.
Mutually beneficial.
Yeah, I was reversing it. Why?
Awesome. Thank you.
Okay, I'm gonna, yeah, thanks, Michael. I'm going to share my screen for the underdocumented topics. Now, this was just from the top of my head. I think the community will have far more, I think, feedback on what's documented and what's not. I just kind of gathered from the community, especially the Slack channel, kind of like some common questions or things that I know Marquez has a capability of, but we don't talk about it, or there's just no documentation. The first one is just Marquez extensions and customization. So maybe the community isn't aware, but we do publish a Marquez jar that you can pull into your application and add as a dependency, and then you could build custom APIs on top of that, or even deploy Marquez with a model, your own model alongside the model that Marquez manages internally for lineage and tracking runs and jobs and data sets. And that's actually something we do at Astronomer. There's custom code that we build on top just for features that we need to deliver, and especially around airflow DAGs. So that is something that I believe we should have more documentation on, maybe what classes can be extended. Some classes within the Marquez code base are final, but it might make sense to open them up and allow other organizations within the community to extend them and add custom code. So I think there's a lot that we can do there. So once you have that custom ability where you've extended key classes Marquez, then you could use the run transition listener. And this does not get much documentation as well. So this transition listener actually keeps track of all the state changes that happen. So if a run went from started to complete, or it went from start to failed, this listener hooks into the Open Lineage service that we have. So when a run level event comes in as an Open Lineage event, we can keep track to see what was the previous state and what's the current state. And you'll see that the job input update. So if the input of the job was updated, you get the run ID, you get run metadata, the job name, and also what were the run inputs as well. And then we also get changes to the job output. So you would get updates on, again, the run ID, the version ID, and what were the output data sets and the name associated with, or I'm sorry, the namespace associated with that job. And then the run transitions itself. So here, this is probably the most important one here, is just to understand what was the run ID. So in this case, it's an open lineage compliant run ID, and what was the old state, and what did it transition to. So you can imagine if you have that type of information, you could kind of build, so like I mentioned earlier, you might have your own model deployed alongside Marquez in a database, and then you can start populating that with information that you might find useful as you extend and maybe build on top of Marquez. So I just wanted to point these two out. I think it's the first time we may have talked about it, and I feel like maybe some documentation would be warranted. But before I go any further, any like questions on the, or anything that someone would like to add to the extension and customization? And I just asked like if anyone has questions, but customization, I think on the UI can also go a long way, which I didn't list. So there's facets that are returned by Marquez that you might want to do depending on your org and the custom facets that you are collecting through the Open Lineage event. You might want to apply certain logic on the front end to display it a certain way based off of if a facet is present in a job or a data set or even a run. Okay, so I'll stop there if there are any questions or if someone wants to add something. Okay. The Marquez data model, this is an interesting one. The model is available, or it's definitely hidden. The link is hidden. So we do have the entire Marquez model documented at different stages. Now, this is not all that useful because if someone's looking at this, they're like, well, how do those tables make any sense? Like the job versioning IO mapping, that's so core to how we build the lineage graph, but it's not documented. It's documented through a diagram, but not really spoken about in terms of the relationship between data sets and the job versions, and how that mapping table helps us run lineage queries. And of course, Mike has been involved a lot in defining this lineage query, as well as others, but there's optimizations that were made. And this is also not documented so much. I mean, there are Java docs, but how much in depth should we go into how we build the lineage graph? And you can see here that the IO type input and output is coming from the job version IO mapping. So a job version will have inputs and outputs, and we use an enum to define if the dataset UUID that is in the mapping table associated with the job version, if that's an input or output, and we recursively go through that and so forth. So I think this could use a bit more discussion, maybe in a separate, in another Marquez community meeting, we could go more in depth because I think there's some gap in knowledge on how this might work. And especially if we have other contributors coming in and they want to help optimize this query, because we do get some members saying, why don't we use a graph database? And like, oh, we don't have to because we have this really fancy query. So they're not yet convinced. They're like, we need a graph database. I'm like, okay. But I think if we could clearly state why we're doing it this way and why we are not moving to a graph database until we cripple our Postgres is just unable to handle our queries, but there's a lot more optimizations that we can do. I just wanted to point that out. The metadata versioning is also something that our website goes into, but there's been a proposal by Ryan, I believe. Yeah, Ryan Hatter, who's also an astronomer, but he has a proposal out that talks about how, one, there's not much documentation on the versioning, but there's also, I think, a little bug that he's looking to fix with this as well. The key thing, let me go with this file. This is interesting. It's called Calm Lineage Endpoint Proposal, but I don't think that's the right title for it. We should leave a comment. But and at a high level, Marquez has one version mode at the moment, and that's metadata comes in, and there's an internal versioning function on the data set and jobs that are applied. But systems have external versions that, if they're provided, Marquez can use that and not apply its own versioning logic. So OpenLineage has a version facet that was introduced, I believe, and we want to honor that. So there's a lot more that we can do around versioning that really from when we first shipped Marquez, that was pretty much it. You know, there was not much beyond the simple versioning function that we applied to the certain metadata that's coming in. And it looks like he's outlining which classes will be affected and so forth. But just want to point that out, that there's a proposal, but alongside this, I think it'd be great to have more detail in our website about how versioning works. I think there's just a gap there that exists in everyone's mind, and to some extent, some more than others, and I don't think that's a good thing. So I just wanted to point those three out. Anyone else wanted to chime in on that, or? Okay. And the last one, and I just use job context as an example, but there are APIs in some code in Marquez that has been deprecated, or it's just dead code, and we don't document that. So there's actually an issue opened around the job context is not updating. It kind of takes the last value that was received. And so context is just key value pairs. And before Open Lineage, we were using a job context as a way to insert just random metadata that you'd want to associate with a job. And that kind of just lingered. So there's just things like that kind of creep up in issues because others want to contribute, and they're like, am I looking at code that's dead? It looks like it's deprecated, or it looks like there's a bug, but it's really not used anymore. And I feel like there could be a lot more that we do there. So I just want to make a comment on that, and something we're actively working on. And those are the ones that came to mind. Peter, if you wanted to talk about the UI, or anyone else about things that are missing, that topics that are undocumented. I know there's probably more, but if anyone had additional things.
Yeah, I don't think that you covered this, but maybe talking about job and data set sim linking, that's definitely undocumented or underdocumented.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. That's a fairly new feature that we pushed out. And yeah, how do you use symlinks? Like, why are symlinks important? And they do work a little bit differently from jobs and data sets, right? There's a little, but they function the same way, but there are some nuances that are a bit different. And you're absolutely right. So, do we get to the point where we want to have docs alongside new features? And I think we want to get there, right? We want to have new APIs, which, okay, they're in the open API spec, but there are fields that are added, and it's not just enough to say, this is a symlink for a data set. Well, how do you use it, and in what context? And it would be great if we get to the point where we're maybe doing blogs for big features that, we're actually going to talk about next. Major architectural changes. Should there be a blog that accompanies some of these changes? And I think Symlink would have been a good candidate for that. I'm not calling you out, Mike. I'm just saying we all could do a little bit better.
Yeah, no, totally call me out. I think that just generally there's probably a lack of discipline in making sure that we always complete each feature, right? And completion should include documentation. It should include example API calls, right? So, but I think that, the more we kind of bring this up, the more we kind of can remind each other to hold each other accountable for it. So, yeah, never be afraid to say, Mike, you didn't do the thing you're supposed to do.
Yeah, but it also is like we want that feature out. But I get it. Yeah, there's we do have some blog posts. I think the new column. So let's give us some credit. We're not that bad. There was a good blog post by Pavel, or I'm sorry, Pavel and Michael, that worked on the column level lineage feature, and it goes into the payload and how it works, what facet was used from Open Lineage. So and even some codes. I think there are some good. There's a good foundation here, and even with soft delete. So yeah, maybe we're not doing that bad, but I think it could be more communicated a bit more that we're working on these features, and we're making progress on the project. Yeah. But yeah, thanks, Mike. That was Simlinks that definitely one. And major architectural decisions. This one, I just put together different proposals. I just want to say that we make decisions out in the open and through proposals. So if you, we talked about this in the past about how to open mode proposal, but we've started to see a few proposals make its way into the directory, and the search service, I think, is one that I'm really excited about. So column level lineage, there was good discussion there, and the result of that was an API that now is part of Marquez, but originally it was a collaboration with Julian and Pavel, and talked about what the endpoint would look like and the payload. So we're trying to make that more standard, and it seems like the communication has been really great, and a lot of really great feedback and discussion. The search API, that one just got merged in. So Pavel wrote a really great proposal on the search API, and we talked about how in generally the design and how to make the search backend configurable. So one thing that we do see is some orgs that are deploy Marquez, they want to be able to index the description and the facets, and it's not just enough to do a simple text search. So now we're looking into kind of saying we have our search engine, and that will back the search queries. But I won't go into this too much. I think this is going to be something that Pavel can talk about, but I just wanted to show that there's some really great discussions happening, especially around versioning and some facets. But I think the three that are coming up is dataset partitions. I think we're starting to see that as Open Lineage is collecting some of this metadata, especially around S3 buckets, every path is a dataset. Really, and normally you partition your buckets by a timestamp or some ID, and that's the next addition that we want, or modifications and extensions that we want to make to the data, to the Marquez's data model. So that's up for grabs. I think I'm just kind of saying, if anyone is interested in dataset partitions, that would be a great one to take on, especially if you're interested in the space. I think for us, that will be something that we want to prioritize. But if someone's out there who would like to begin the discussion, we'd love the help. And one that we all love, the data retention. So currently right now, Marquez doesn't have any retention on the data, or it just keeps all this metadata, and there's no pruning of the database, and that really results in scaling concerns. So there is an issue, I believe, that was open in Marquez, but there's no proposal. And it would be great if we could kind of take that issue and move it into proposal, because the runs table can get very, very large. I don't know. We've seen millions. I don't know how high it gets, but it affects the performance. And what I mentioned before around the runs table, having this high cardinality where, they have so many queries that depend on that runs table. The one thing we can do is partition that table. So there's things that we can do, but like a quick win is, don't keep things around if you don't have to. So the retention could be a month, it could be 6 months, but it'd be great to configure that. So those are decisions that are being discussed that I think will have major impact on performance and give us some runway. Because right now we're just holding on to everything. And I think the one last thing, and this is going to be a collaboration between Open Lineage and Marquez. So ownership, who owns a data set, who owns a job, and also if a job produces a data set and could be owned by another team. So there's all these different scenarios. So you could be a team that produces or filters data and outputs it somewhere, but it's actually owned by a different team. So you're kind of doing the prep work for them. So this is going to be the next discussion that's coming. I think if I was going to rank them, it would definitely be data set partitions, and then in parallel, maybe data retention, and then it would be ownership, because I think, we don't necessarily want Marquez to be kind of know what, or build our own internal model around ownership, just because every org does it differently. So it would be more pluggable. But those are open discussions and things that we've had offline, but nothing in issues, or I think there was some in Slack. And Open Lineage, I think, has a proposal, or there's an email thread around ownership, but I think we're a bit far from a consensus. So we need to have more and more discussions on that. But if anyone, again, is interested, any security people out there that would love to know what data is being accessed by what team, this would be an interesting proposal that could be written and have, again, major impact on where the project goes. That's all I had. Again, I'm just kind of spitballing. I think this was some key things, and if I look, all of this is kind of happening in parallel, which is amazing. A year ago, I think we were still trying to figure out. Yeah, I don't know. It's just over the year, if you look at all the different changes that have happened to the Marquez API and the model, it's something that the entire team and community can be pretty proud of. So, and all the great contributors, right? And so we couldn't do it without everyone, which is why I'm saying, hey, pick up some of these big decisions. Yeah, you don't have to write them. I think that's what I'm trying to say. I think it's important to facilitate the discussion, and that might be the biggest, if you're thinking about contributing, and you're like, oh, it has to be code, just facilitating the discussion is more impactful than you might know. Okay, well, I'm off my soapbox. And
thank you, Willie. That was inspiring.
Okay. I've inspired Julian? No, I can't. Okay. Normally you inspire me, but I'm honored.
Yeah, and I want to second what you said about contributors and acknowledge that we have a new contributor on the call, Prachi. So thank you for your work already on the project.
Thank you. I'm happy to be part of the community.
Yeah, welcome, Prachi.
So our next topic on the agenda is our open discussion. There are a couple topics, but does anybody have a topic that you'd like to add to the list? Okay, why don't we start with the first one? I'm curious. I put this one on. I'm curious what people think about the need and the value of looking beyond Twitter for our social media. And the options that are out there. So one, I think the one that's coming to mind for most people right now is Mastodon. We could, regardless of what happens with Twitter, we could create a Mastodon account, for example.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. No matter, I think we should have a presence everywhere. It just adds another touch point. So it's like, okay, let me tweet, and then I don't know what Mastodon uses. Is it also a tweet or just like a message? Blog, yeah. but yeah, if there's a presence there, and I know the data community is transitioning, but that stuff's going to take time. It's going to be in limbo. So it's all depends on maybe you, Michael, because you kind of manage all that. So why am I talking?
So I think, yeah, we might want to try having a Mastodon account in addition to what we have today. I already seen people creating an open lineage group on Mastodon. There's kind of like an official open lineage account.
Nice.
So I think if people are doing that, we may as well have an official one, right? It's kind of something that publishes the releases and like the blog posts when there's a new blog post and those kind of things.
Yep.
So the key question then on Mastodon is which server to use. I see a bunch of people use Fastodon, like as a free open source software, Todon. I'm not sure. I don't know if the LFAI in data has a policy in that regard or a server. Maybe the Linux Foundation has a Mastodon server. I don't know.
I mean, regardless of the server, you can follow the people or group on other servers, right? So
Right.
Yeah, this is correct, but you still need to decide where the official Marquez account would be hosted, and you want to pick a server that is trustworthy, that is going to stay around. A lot of those servers are maintained by volunteers, right? So you need to pick something that is going to stick around.
Okay, so it's a bit more complicated than Switch. So maybe another discussion is what server to pick, and I never thought we would have to ask that question, but yeah.
Maybe the LFAI in data or other project have already presence, right? So that we could follow their lead.
That's good.
There.
That's a good point.
Okay, thank you. And our second topic, I also put this on the list, but something that's come out of the LFAI process is it's not a requirement, but it's a strong suggestion that we internationalize and make more accessible our UI. This is a big lift though, and I wanted to raise this topic just to get people's maybe ideas about how to make this happen.
Are there recommendation of like crowdsource, like platforms to do that, right? Things that facilitate this happening? Because
it's not as if we need to translate everything. I think it's just we have to annotate all of our English language markup tags with something that can work with a translator, like a browser-based translator. So it's mostly just going through all of the pages and annotating the tags that have fixed English language text in them, which I don't think is a huge task. And I think it's fairly mechanical because there's just not that much vocabulary there. So I think it's very doable.
It's doable, but we have to also consider like other minuscule things like datetime formats, and some countries have different direction of sentences. But yeah, I think the more work is on the documentations and the our doc sites.
Yeah.
Well, I do think that we typically use ISO format for date times. So I feel like that's already pretty internationalized. So I don't think we need to focus on that a lot. And yes, I mean, I think you're right in pointing out the documentation gap, but I think that we can make a big step for internationalizing the UI without having to translate every piece of documentation that we have, right? We don't have to do it all in order to do anything. But I think Peter's right. Like it's a fairly straightforward mechanical task to just go through and annotate all the English language text and anything I think that we're returning on the server side as well, right?
Well, do we have to do this for our blogs and website, or is it just the, okay, it's just the UI, the front end, right?
I don't know, Michael. I mean, you have the most insight into what's, again, I know you said it's not required, but it's strongly encouraged, right? Do they go into
Right.
details?
Yeah. I'll have to look at the badge language again, but what I remember is that it pertains to the software. And so that made me think that it's the UI and not necessarily blogs and docs. But I'll look at the badge language again.
So Marquez is written in Java, is that correct? And in that case, there's an internationalization package that we could use, like separate the resources, like those different per different language messages. And yeah, I mean, it's pretty doable.
Okay. Well, thank you. If there are no additional discussion topics, we've reached the end of our agenda.
Michael, I'm wondering, do we also just like a quick announcement on what we're doing next month for the community meeting?
Yeah.
Which I think we were going to skip just because of the timing of it around the holidays. So just wanted to mention that.
Right. Thank you. Okay. So we'll see you in January, not December, and we'll update the wiki and the calendar invite.
Perfect.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for coming, everyone. Hope you enjoy the rest of your day and the holidays, and we'll see you in January.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Bye-bye.
See you, folks.
Bye, everyone. Mhm.